You need to know that I never go anywhere without my own personal cameraman. So, just so you know, this is Vincenzo, and I, now refuse to go anywhere without him. And sadly, I'm getting to like it. First of all, thank you very much indeed for coming. I'm really pleased to see you all, and it's really nice of you to take the time to come and find out about a job that apparently you're a little bit interested in, probably for various reasons. You're all stagiaires, almost. How many from the Parliament? Okay. And Commission? And Committee of the Regions? Hooray! So, that's a great mix. And so you're almost at the end of this amazing experience. Yeah, and all got great plans? No, not much nodding there. Well, I hope to be able to tell you something that will at least interest you today, and even if I don't manage to persuade you that you should all become interpreters, at least you'll understand more about what the job is about and why we like it, and why it's an interesting career for bright young people like yourselves. You, in fact, are our ideal target audience. That's why we're always very keen to do conferences like this for the stagiaires, because you've got everything that we're looking for. You are multilingual, you are talented, otherwise you wouldn't be here as stagiaires. You're interested in the European project, otherwise you wouldn't be here as stagiaires. You know about the European institutions and how they work, and I'm sure a lot of you know a lot about communication. And so really you are what we're looking for in terms of a profile, and that's why we wanted to talk specifically to you as a group. I'll just explain a little bit what's going to happen this morning. We've got 2 hours. I'd like to talk to you just for a little while, show you some pictures about what interpreting is, how you get into it, what's the profile, what's the path into the profession. Then we'd like to give you the opportunity to be interpreters. We're going to let you, if you want, go into the booths and have a go. We've got 2 speakers, sadly not live speakers. We've got François Hollande. We've got his speech that he made in the plenary session last week, so you can all have a go at being Hollande's interpreter. So obviously he'll be speaking French. And we also have Prince Charles as a real treat. He's a very interesting speaker, as you'll discover when you try to interpret him. So he'll be doing a speech in English. And so anybody who wants to have a go at interpreting will be very welcome to do so. And then afterwards, I'd be really interested in your impressions, whether you liked it, what it felt like. And I think it will give you quite an interesting insight, if you've never tried it before, into what it's like and just how much fun it can be. So we'll do that after the presentation. So listen carefully to what I'm saying so that you'll know what to do when you get there. There is no obligation to go into the booth, by the way, but those who do, I'd be really grateful if you would dare put the microphone on so that I was going to say so that I can have a laugh, but I meant so that I can listen and make helpful comments afterwards. So, but we'll do that at the end of the presentation. I'm more than happy to take any questions that you have at any point. There are no stupid questions. There may be stupid answers, but anything you'd like to know. If you don't want to ask in front of everybody, I'll be staying at the end, so if anyone's got any more questions they'd like to ask, I'd be very happy to answer them. At the end, we also have some lovely postcards, we have DVDs, we have all kinds of little things to give away on the way out, which will give you contacts and information should you wish to find out more. We also have a Facebook page, European Parliament Interpreters, DG Inter, that's the name of our Directorate General, and on there you'll find lots and lots of links and a community. So if you want to join that, that would also be very helpful and useful for you, I think. And the bit I always forget to do is tell you who I am and why I'm standing here. Obviously my name is Alison Graves, as you can see from the slide. I came to Brussels as a very young, impressionable freelance interpreter, thinking that I would just come here and try it out for 6 months, and that was 23 years ago. I started as a freelance interpreter. I started when I was 4, just in case anybody's wondering. I started as a freelance interpreter and then became a staff interpreter working in the English booth. So that means really I've spent my whole career speaking. I just talk all day, every day. And 2 years ago, I became head of unit for interpreter training. So now I'm more involved in the training of new interpreters, the training of our own interpreters, professional development, and so on. So that's my role now, and a lot less time spent actually in the booth. So I think that's all we need to know to start with. So let's move on. Those of you who work here will have already worked out what an amazing place this Parliament is. It is really a fantastic workplace because it never stops changing. It's not just that we get a whole load of new members every 5 years, which does make a huge change. The Parliament becomes a different place every 5 years, but it changes all the time. And for anybody working in this environment, that's a huge challenge, keeping up with the new powers, the new issues, the new dossiers that come through, the way things change, the way the outside world changes, and so the Parliament changes. And so it is chaotic, but wonderful. We have 754 members, 27 member states, soon to be 28 member states, 23 official languages, soon to be 24. Things change all the time. And keeping up with that is a massive challenge for everybody, but for the linguistic services, a very particular challenge, because all the 23, soon to be 24 official languages are treated equally. We also often work with Arabic, Russian, Japanese, Chinese, Hebrew, Kazakh, a whole range of other languages as well, which we provide coverage for. So this is a massive, massive operation. And multilingualism is very much the cornerstone of European democracy. And the rules of the Parliament state very clearly, I hope you can read that, state very clearly that the members have the right to speak in their languages. So the Council Regulation number 1 is the one which regulates language use, and it's obviously not the interpretation services which decide which languages will be official languages and which won't. Obviously not. We are just service providers. The language provision is a very political question. And members can speak the official language of their choice. And that's quite an interesting wording. It doesn't say members will speak the official language of their country or the official language of their birth. It says they speak the official language of their choice. And so that means that not all members do speak their own language. Some members prefer to speak in what they fondly imagine is English. Some members speak their foreign languages extremely well. But I hope, a lot of them don't speak it as well as they think they do. And what happens then is there is somebody speaking in imperfect English. And a lot of the listeners are listening imperfectly because they don't understand English perfectly either. And so there's this huge mismatch between the message that is intended and the message that is received. And part of our job is to persuade the members that they can leave it to us, they can leave it to the professionals, and we will transmit their message in the way they intended it. We can make them sound really good. And that's a lot of our job, is persuading them to trust us, to have confidence in the interpretation services. And that's why it's so important that our quality is of the highest possible level, because it's very easy to lose the confidence of the members. We have to provide excellent service at all times, or they won't want it. The official language that's often chosen, we used to call it BSE, which was badly spoken English. But now I've heard someone refer to it as Desperanto, and I quite like that. So that is actually going to be the 25th official language of the European Union. Why we're so hot on this is because for interpreters, it's a joy to get a speaker speaking their own language, to listen to someone speaking really beautiful German, and to be able to interpret that is a joy. To listen to someone struggling with a language that they're not really totally confident in makes our job very difficult as well, because you've then got to decipher what is it they're trying to say. So we really are keen on members speaking their own language. And if you've listened to somebody like Martin Schulz, who is an amazing German speaker, absolutely amazing. And he is a joy to interpret. He's a huge challenge, and it is a little bit like riding a roller coaster, because he is so quick and so clever, and he can change register like nobody I've ever heard speak. And 1 minute he's very high flown and talking about the Congress of Vienna, and the next minute he's being extremely vulgar, because he does like to use colourful expressions, all in the same sentence, and he's like this all the time. And for an interpreter to keep up with that is an amazing challenge and a great ride to be on. So that's why we'd always prefer members to speak their own language, if at all possible, because it makes our job easier and it makes them sound better, we think. And why is it so important that we have all these languages? Why don't other international institutions have the same degree of multilingualism? Because if you look at the UN, they have 192 members, but 6 languages. The Council of Europe has 47 members and 2 languages. Why does the European Parliament, the European institutions, why do we insist on having all these languages? And there are really 3 main reasons. One is that the European Parliament has a direct lawmaking function. It drafts and agrees legislation which is directly binding on the people of Europe. The people of Europe have to be able to understand. Otherwise it's kind of medieval, as if everyone's drafting laws in Latin or in a language that the people don't understand. And we need the direct involvement of the people of Europe. This is their parliament. This is your parliament. It's mine. The members here represent me and you and our mums and our grannies. And they need to understand what this parliament is doing. Everything that the Parliament does, the plenary sessions, most of the committee meetings are web streamed. So any citizen anywhere in the world can listen to what the European Parliament is saying in any language. And that's a huge step towards democratic transparency and openness. I don't know how many of our mums and grannies and aunties actually do ever listen to the debates of the European Parliament, but it's there and it's accessible to the people of Europe. And also, there's a question of identity. People's identity is often very much bound up with the language that they use, and we need to allow people to express that identity. Often, you'll hear people say that English is enough, that everybody speaks English, and that's all we need. We could save lots of money if everybody just spoke English. But the most recent Eurobarometer survey found that 38% of the citizens of Europe felt that they could speak English well enough to hold a conversation. That's hold a conversation, that's not win a political argument. So that means that a huge percentage of the European population would be disenfranchised if everybody had to speak English. Any citizen can become an MEP, and we do not want to disenfranchise the majority of the population of Europe. If I want to vote for a taxi driver as my representative, a taxi driver who doesn't have a secondary, a tertiary education, then why should I not be able to do that if that is the person that I want? And so it's really important that the institutions, and particularly the Parliament, as the direct representatives of the people, keep multilingualism. So that's why this institution, I think, is so attached to that principle, and why I think it has to be. So to deal with all that, what do we do? How do we organise it? We have at the moment approximately 380 staff interpreters, and staff interpreters are fonctionnaire like everybody else, same EPSO competition, except of course with interpreting tests included. But we are civil servants with the same conditions, the same pay scales, the same promotion possibilities as everybody else. But about 50% of the work done by interpreters is done by freelance interpreters who are recruited on a daily basis. We've in the past tended to have big peaks in meetings on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So then we've needed to recruit more interpreters to cover the meetings. And then we have fewer meetings at the beginning and end of the week. So the staff can cover the meetings throughout the week, but then on peak days we need to recruit freelance interpreters. In Strasbourg, for example, we have 1,000 interpreters in the building. So that's quite a huge operation. Our freelance interpreters, as you can see there, are accredited. We need our freelance interpreters to be as good as the staff interpreters. There's no distinction in quality. And so all freelance interpreters have to do an accreditation test. We won't let anybody loose in the booth unless we know that they're good enough to do the job. And I'll talk a little bit more about training and accreditation later on. Yeah, as I said, 1,000 interpreters per day in the building. That's a lot of talking and a lot of organisation. And one of the great things about being an interpreter here in this institution is that you get to do everything. You get to go everywhere and see and hear absolutely everything. We don't specialise. So committees, for example, we do all the committees, which is interesting but also extremely challenging because it means you need to know a lot. Because on Monday afternoon you're doing transport, all day Tuesday you're doing economic affairs, Wednesday you're doing environment, and Thursday morning you're doing petitions. And this is a lot of work to prepare all these meetings. But it means that interpreters get to know absolutely everything. They get to know what's happening, they get to know the subjects really well, and you get to know the people extremely well. And you get to see who's a player and who isn't, and who's strong in what, and who is influential where. And the longer you stay, the more fun it gets, because the more you start to understand what's happening. And for a nosy person, it's an absolutely brilliant job, because you get to see all these things happening. So the committees are very, very interesting from a content point of view. You get to learn, and that's one of the things that interpreters have to be willing to do, and that's learn all the time. I mean, all the time. New subjects, new issues, new things. The political groups, though, are almost even more fun, because you do get up close and personal, and you see how they operate. You see what they do. In the political groups, it's a bit like a family, and you all know how mean families can be. And it's really that's where you really see what's happening. And again, the longer you stay, the more you start to see what's happening and why that particular person is so upset with that person. So that is really a very interesting part of the job, but also possibly a challenging part of the job. Committees we don't get to choose. You have to go to whichever committee you happen to be assigned to that day. No choice. No, I don't like transport. I only want to do legal affairs. That's just too bad. But political groups, in a way, is even more tricky, because clearly you are not going to identify with all the political groups. There are going to be some who you as a person feel more affinity with, and some who, quite frankly, you don't really want to be in a room with. But you have no choice in that. That is not what you are there for. You are there to be these people's voice, to enable them to communicate whatever it is they want to communicate. And your opinion and your feelings and your political views as an interpreter must not in any way be evident. And that can be quite a challenge sometimes, because you do find yourself with people who are, quite frankly, repulsive. And you have to say things that you really do not want to say, but you have to. And so that can be a challenging part of the job. And because this is a political institution, it happens more here than in other places. Because in technical meetings, that's not really an issue. In more administrative meetings, it's not a problem. But when it's politics, there are things that can touch you quite deeply. But you still have to be professional and calm and do the job. Plenary sessions, we also do. Everybody complains about the plenary sessions because they're much too difficult. It's too fast, people are reading. Those of you who've seen the plenary know that. Members come with an 8-page speech and 1 minute speaking time. And they are damn well going to make that speech. And for the interpreters, that is really the hardest part of the job. Written speeches are more difficult to interpret because it's not natural spoken language. And these are speeches that have been crafted by various people over various hours, and they're perfect and beautiful, but it's not spoken language. And the interpreters hear it. They don't see it, they just hear it and have to do it immediately. And something like written German is never the same as spoken German. The language structure is immensely complicated. You don't get the verb until the end of the paragraph. At least in spoken language you get more of a chance. And there's always the terrible German sentence where you've launched into it and at the very end of the sentence the speaker says, nicht. And then you think, oh God. And then you've got to quickly get it all back and just say not at the end. So these are part of the challenges, and the written speeches are one of our biggest nightmares. So everybody complains bitterly about the plenary session, but at the same time, that's where everything happens. And that's where it's fun and full on and exciting and interesting. So actually, if we don't get to do plenary, we complain, even though we complain when we do. Delegations are also a very different forum. You're with people from different parts of the world, new subjects, people coming in from the outside. Press conferences can be very heated, can be very fun. It means that you get to see your words in the newspaper the next day, and that's a game we sometimes play, trying to spot our words in the Financial Times the day after the press conference. Did the reporter actually write down what I said? And often they do. So that's quite an interesting part of the job as well. But all these things do mean a lot of work and a lot of preparation. And that is a huge part of the interpreter's job. It's not just sitting there talking. The preparation is a massive part of the job. And an interpreter who is not prepared will never be a good interpreter. And I've already mentioned this a little bit. You do get to be up close and personal with some quite amazing people. And you get to get inside their head. Because to really interpret properly, you've got to understand where their sentences are going, what do they mean. And sometimes you really do feel that you are inside. You're doing it from the inside. You know what that person's going to say. And I've just put here some of the interesting characters that we come across. I couldn't resist Hugh Grant, I'm sorry. He was in the Parliament doing a conference on phone hacking and on privacy in the media. And I have to tell you, I have never seen so many stagiaires in one place at one time as when Hugh was there. And the rest of us were trying to, beat them out of the way so that we could get in. And interestingly, we had there is Hillary Clinton. When her husband was here in the Parliament, there was actually a notice sent round saying that no interns would be admitted. And I think there are various reasons, which was very funny. The Dalai Lama, that was an amazing moment, a really amazing person to see closely. And before he arrived, his office had sent a copy of his speech, because he had a written speech. They sent the speech to us so that we could all be ready. And we were very grateful, because this is the Dalai Lama. You don't want to be caught inventing new spiritual sayings for the Dalai Lama. So every interpreter very carefully prepared the speech. Everybody was ready. The Dalai Lama came in, went to the podium and looked around the room and said, "Well, you've all read my speech, so I'm going to make a different speech." At which point you can see all the interpreters going, and he did. He spoke freely and was absolutely wonderful. I mean, it was a wonderful and beautiful speech, but not at all the speech that everybody had spent a long time preparing carefully. So, we have to be ready for the unexpected. Angela Merkel is another amazing speaker. And I haven't quite worked out what it is that she does, because she's not exciting. She's not, no, I don't mean that in a negative way, but I mean she's not a flamboyant, that's a better word. She's not a flamboyant speaker, but she is absolutely incredible. And I've seen her in the plenary session, walk into a room that's not necessarily hostile, but is not necessarily there to agree with her. And in 2 minutes, they are eating out of her hand. And I can't work out what she's done, but I'm working on it. And I'll let you know if I find out. And Francois Hollande, you will find out. You will find out what kind of a speaker he is when you have a go in the booths? Is he going to be easy? Is he going to be difficult? And why? Now, what is it that makes speakers difficult for interpreters? Now, one thing is, are they reading a written text or are they speaking freely? But a lot of it is how logical is their speech. Can you see where this is going to go? Because that's what interpreters need to do. You need to anticipate where this particular phrase is going. And people who are not entirely logical in their thinking processes are very difficult. But I'll let you make your own mind up about Mr. Hollande. And Bill Gates. American speakers are really interesting as well, because they don't use English in the way that British people use English. And sometimes it's really strange. It's really strange. And I was very struck by almost the kind of old-fashioned use of English by some of these American speakers. But that's a whole different speech. So these are the people that we get to see and to be close to. And it is a huge privilege. It's a real privilege either to interpret these people or to speak to these people, because they hear my voice in their ears. I'm speaking to Hillary Clinton. I mean, it's just so exciting, I can't tell you. It's really, it's a huge privilege. And that's what this job can give you. And we travel a lot. I'm just looked at my watch and realised I'm going to get lost in anecdotes if I'm not careful. We travel a lot. The top left is Strasbourg, making it look very sort of glamorous and beautiful by night, because we do go to Strasbourg every month. But we travel a lot with the Parliament. And because you're with an official delegation, you get to go places and see things that you wouldn't otherwise. Doors open, and it is really a fantastic opportunity. The wigwam in the middle is an excuse for an anecdote. I once found myself in the north of Finland, and it was midsummer, so it was light all the time. We were in a forest at 2 o'clock in the morning in a wigwam, and there was a salmon roasting in the middle of the fire, and I was interpreting José Appart, a French Belgian farmer, because it was all about forestry and farming. And I had this kind of out-of-body experience. I thought, I'm Alison Graves from Birkenshaw. What am I doing in this wigwam at 2 o'clock in the morning? It was just so strange, such a strange experience, but really amazing. And then the next day we had a meeting in the sauna. And here is where another very important part of the interpreter's job comes into play, and that is confidentiality. Because of course we would never reveal anything that we have heard or seen in that particular case during a meeting. Because we, as I said earlier, get to see and hear everything. And it's very important that we realise what a privileged position that is, and that what we know could be very damaging to other people. So confidentiality is a huge part of our ethical code. And so, of course, I will never tell what happened in the sauna. So what do you need, apart from strong nerves? All our interpreters have to be graduates, and you can be a graduate in any subject. But what you absolutely need is training. And this is for staff interpreters or freelance interpreters. We cannot offer interpreter training from scratch to interpreters. You have to come to us already trained. And it's just a little bit like learning to drive a car. It's a multitasking skill. Somebody has to teach you how to do it. And you have to practice it until you're good enough to pass your driving test. And it's exactly the same thing. Someone has to teach you how to listen, process and speak all at the same time. You have to practice it, and then you have to come to us, pass your driving test. If you prove to us that we can let you loose in the booth and you won't run over anybody, then that's fine. But you absolutely need training, and normally that would be postgraduate. That's the most normal path into the profession. People do a first degree and then postgraduate training. And there are lots of very good courses throughout Europe. And if anybody wants more information about options, choices, I'd be very happy to do that perhaps at the end. So that would be the most normal route into the profession. You need to speak it says mother tongue, but that's a bit of a loaded concept, your main language perfectly. Most of the time, the vast majority of the time, interpreters work into their own language. I only work into English. We do have interpreters who work into a second language as well, but that is not the majority of the time at all. So it's your mother tongue, your own language, which is your most important tool. And if you think about it for a minute, you have to be able to speak like any of the people in the room. So if you've got a room full of lawyers, you need to be able to match their language. If you've got a room full of politicians, you have to be able to speak the way that they can speak. You have to be able to speak like Guatemalan coca leaf growers, and I'm not joking. You need to be able to speak like Rotterdam dock workers. You have to be able to match their language so that you create the same impression that they're creating. And that demands a huge amount of versatility from your mother tongue. And that's something that I think people overlook a little bit. They think it's the understanding of the languages, which is the most difficult thing, but it's not. It's your mother tongue. And often at our accreditation tests, that turns out to be the problem, that the mother tongue is not strong enough to stand up under the pressure of what you have to do. Excellent general knowledge, because you need to know everything, because you're going to be in every single committee, and you need to be able to keep up, you need to be able to understand. So you need to have the will to learn and know a lot of things. And you have to know things like what happened in the football last night. Because people will come into a meeting, the chairman will switch on the microphone and say, "Oh my God, did you see what happened?" And you're interpreting, and if you don't know what they're talking about, you can't do it properly. So you need to keep up not just with serious current affairs, but with, with the football if it's the football, with the Olympics if it's the Olympics. So whatever is happening, you need to be there, you need to be reading the papers, you need to be keeping up. And of course, you do need to know other languages, and you need to know them extremely well. Generally, you don't have to speak them perfectly, because you'll be working into your own language, but you need to understand everything that's being said in the foreign language. And the languages that you need will depend on what your main language is. Because each booth, and the team of interpreters we call the booth, each booth has its own requirements depending on market conditions almost. For Italian, if you're Italian mother tongue, we can quite easily recruit Italian interpreters who have 4 or 5 foreign languages, quite easily. So we need Italian interpreters with 4 or 5 languages, otherwise we won't recruit you, because we don't need you. If you are English mother tongue, we'll be very grateful if you have 2 foreign languages, because we will never find anybody with 4 or 5. People learn more, but it's very rare for us to find someone with English mother tongue who has more than 2 foreign languages. So it all depends on the market conditions. For Bulgarian, we'll accept people with 1 foreign language. So it all depends on the market situation. That changes all the time. And every year we publish our list of priority profiles, which show what the priorities are at the moment, and you see it develops over time. If you're looking for an interpreting course, there are certain things that you really need to be looking out for. These are the main conditions that we would suggest you look for in any course that you might want to attend. We do also do consecutive interpreting. Simultaneous interpreting is what we do almost all the time in the booths, but consecutive is where, well, for example, you're on a delegation visit, you go to the town hall, the mayor of the town makes a speech welcoming the delegation. He makes the speech 5 or 6 minutes. As the interpreter, you take notes, and after the mayor has made his speech, I make the same speech but in English. But we do that quite a lot. We do it in cases where there isn't any simultaneous equipment. We do it when we travel. I was just talking to a young interpreter yesterday who'd been on a trip to Azerbaijan, and he'd done 8 consecutive speeches, one after the other, and it was Azerbaijani NGOs, and each one made a presentation of the work of their NGO, and he had to interpret all of them consecutively. So we do consecutive, so it's important that that's taught in any course that you might want to do. New technologies are important because, as you can imagine, the world of interpreting is changing with new technology. Video conferencing, for one thing, and machine interpreting we might talk about later if we have time. Is it an option? Is it real? But these are important things to bear in mind. And this is perhaps the most important, is that anybody teaching you ought themselves to know what conference interpreting is. If you were at medical school and you were being taught by someone who wasn't actually a surgeon, someone who'd read about it in a book, or who in fact was a vet, but it's the same thing, isn't it? If you've got translators teaching interpreters, no. If you've got language teachers teaching interpreters, no, because they're not, it's a skill, it's a practical skill that you need to learn. And you would only want to learn open heart surgery from a surgeon. So it's the same kind of thing. So that is a very important point to look out for if you're looking for a course. Is there a personality type for interpreters? Many people would say yes, and you will hear the words prima donna mentioned quite a lot. There are certain attitudes that you will need if this is a job that's going to make you happy. It's not, I think, that you have to have, you have to be a certain way to be a good interpreter. It's just, will the job suit you? Are you the sort of person who's going to like it? Is what it's all about, really. And these are all very important. The curiosity is very important. You have to want to learn. You have to want to know. You will have to want to find out. And yes, you do have to be able to concentrate for long periods very hard, because when you're interpreting, it is total focus. And the minute you start thinking about what's for dinner, you've lost it. Shall I buy those boots? It's gone. You've lost it. So you can't do that. You've got to be able to focus. We do work in teams. Each booth normally has 3 people in it, and we very much work together. So you have to be able to get on with people. It's a very enclosed space. So you have to know how to get on with people, and you will come across some quite interesting characters as well. And motivation, I think, is the most important part of all, because it's a job where, even though we work as a team, even though I'm a member of staff of the European Parliament, in a way it's a very individual job. My performance depends on me and how much I can be bothered. And that's why I've got a picture of a Croatian high jumper, because it's a similar kind of thing. We set the bar very high, as I've said, because we have to. And every day we ask our interpreters to get over that bar. And Blanka Vlasic, she can jump 2 meters, but only if she trains every day, if she keeps fit, if she's, in the right place mentally, physically. She doesn't, okay, I can do it now, I'll stop. And it's the same thing. You have to keep training. You have to keep yourself fit. You have to keep your languages up. You have to keep your knowledge up if you're going to keep jumping that bar. And so that's why at the moment she's my hero at the moment. What we're doing, there are 2 ways people tend to see interpreters. They either think they're some kind of 2-headed monster genius, how on earth do you do that? Or they think you're a kind of walking dictionary, and that you say a word and I say the word in English. But if you do that, it all goes wrong. If you just say the words, it doesn't work. And I've got another little anecdote. I was in a meeting of the delegation to Yemen. I mean, it wasn't in Yemen, it was in fact just up the corridor. And an Irish member had been to Yemen, and she was reporting on her experiences. And she said, there's one really huge problem in Yemen that I think the Parliament ought to try and address. It's a huge problem, and that's the cat problem. So I could see the French booth looking and the German booth looking, and you can actually hear people thinking, all right, cat problem, plague, rabies, you can hear what people are thinking, but it's all keeping moving. And then she said, yes, it's a huge problem, because in Yemen, at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, everybody stops working and starts chewing cat. And then there's panic. However, had you read the the background document, you would know that cat is not C-A-T, it's Q-A-T or K-H-A-T, and it's a drug. It's like a tobacco leaf, and it's a huge problem because they stop working, they start chewing this leaf, they get high, they stop working. So Avril Doyle is talking about a serious drug issue. You are talking about pussycats. And you are miles off. So you somehow have got to get yourself back on track. And that's what I mean. If you just say the words, it will go wrong. And that's what I mean about you need to know. You need to know what people mean. And that's just a very obvious example. But people sometimes mean no when they're saying yes. And that's what you need to understand. So you need to know who are the people in the room, where are they from, what's their background, what's their political opinion likely to be. What's happening in Yemen. You might think, I don't care about Yemen. But this is the motivation. You have to find out. And if you look in Wikipedia, cat actually comes up in the second paragraph about Yemen because it is a huge social issue. So that's what I mean. You need to know, what do people mean.
I have a question. How did you solve this cat situation? How did the interpreters deal with it?
Well, there was a lot of fast talking and putting it back on track. But a lot of the time it's like being an actor. It's a bit like being an actor if you forget your lines. A professional actor, you won't even know that they've forgotten their lines because they're very good at covering it up. And it's a little bit the same with interpreting. And in that particular case, nobody in the room laughed or pointed. So obviously it hadn't been too obvious. So, but I don't know, because I wasn't listening to them all, so I don't know what happened. I could just see the looks on people's faces. But that's another thing. The quality control is very immediate because it's very public. And if an interpreter makes a mistake, in 99% of cases, it's immediately obvious and somebody will immediately pick up on it. So either somebody you're sitting with in the booth will write down what it should have been and you can correct it, or somebody in the room will either say very directly, the interpreter's just made a mistake, and they will do that. Or they will say to the speaker, I'm sorry, did you just say that 98% of? And the speaker will say, no, I didn't, I said 89. So it corrects itself very quickly. I had to have a slide on training since that's what I'm responsible for, and we spend a lot of time helping our interpreters to be the best that they can be. Sending them on language courses. We do summer universities so that people with Italian can spend some time in Italy doing lectures, visiting Parliament and so on. We do thematic training a lot because the subject matter is very complex. At the moment we've got 70 interpreters doing a 2-day course on economic governance. So we organise seminars of this type as well, just to make sure that everybody is up to date. And what does it all cost? Because obviously this is the question that a lot of people ask. Is it worth it? Isn't it so expensive that we should stop? And obviously I'm going to say no, it isn't. But actually in relative terms it's not a huge amount of money. It's a cappuccino per person per year for all multilingualism, for interpretation and translation. And I have been known at this point to get out a little piggy bank and say, if you could all put your €2 in as you leave the door, that would be very useful. But I won't. It's not a huge investment to guarantee democracy. And as Neil Kinnock used to say, organising elections is expensive. But as far as I know, nobody's suggesting that we don't do that. For me, multilingualism in the EU institutions is part of democracy. And that is then an investment that I think we have to make. So that is what I wanted to say for now. As I said, I'm very happy to answer any questions if you want to ask any now. If you're keen, we can just go straight into the booths and everybody can have a go. But for now I'll stop, and after we've done the part in the booths, as I said, I'd be very grateful if you'd come back in just so we can just have a little talk about how it was, whether you liked it, what you felt, and whether you think the perspective is an interesting one, because I think it is, seeing what's happening from there is quite a fun thing. So thank you very much. I'll take any questions if anybody's got anything now.